If you've made a website for anyone recently, you've likely experienced the irony of modern web development. While there are so many amazing frameworks and tools, they all tend to prioritize either developer experience or client experience, so you have to choose. Your clients know and enjoy WordPress, but you don't. So just when you get everything live, your client calls to say, hey, the site's broken. So you ask the question, did you install a plugin again? Of course they did. So you swing to the other side. You start prioritizing DX. But now you got a new problem. You have to either spend hours beating your head against the wall over schema files or give your client something obtuse and confusing. They can't remember how to update anything, so you become a part-time YouTuber, sending them unlisted videos and writing up documentation. But it doesn't have to be like this. If you're like me, your choice for building sites is Astro. But what CMS can you use that makes it easy on you and simple for your clients? How about one that uses your existing Git repository so you keep ownership of your code? Or what about one that understands your Astro site the first time you set it up with continuous integration? That's right, you immediately start editing or adding blog posts in a visual editor with literally 2 lines of code. You probably want power and customization though, right? How is this for powerful? A full live editor with type safety for any component you choose, all pushed to your repository automatically and shareable with any client. This is CloudCannon, and I can't wait to show you all about it. Hey, what's up? My name is Chris, and welcome to Coding in Public. Now, before we move forward, I want to let you know that CloudCannon is sponsoring this video, but all the content, thoughts, and opinion in this video are my own. I regularly have companies reach out to me, but I rarely make sponsored content because I'm rarely personally interested in their products. When I first saw CloudCannon, however, I was interested. All right, with that out of the way, who is CloudCannon for? CloudCannon is the CMS for devs building static sites who need a user-friendly experience for clients or editors, but who don't want to sacrifice good DX during development either. And with their brand new integration with Astro, it's the perfect choice for agencies and developers who need a CMS that's easy to set up and share with clients or in-house editors. You can keep Astro as a developer and give your editors an easy-to-use CMS. We're lucky to live in a day with lots of CMS options. So why would you choose CloudCannon? While it's obviously not for everyone, I think it is an easy yes for a particular type of developer. First, CloudCannon is for static site builders, in this case, Astro. Second, CloudCannon is for devs who just want things to work out of the box. It's got a no-fuss setup. Just point your repo in the right direction, it scans your site, predicts your schema automatically, and makes data and content files immediately visually editable. It's about as easy a setup as I've ever done. Third, CloudCannon makes it easy to progressively enhance your CMS experience with editable components. It's not all or nothing. Their new open source Bookshop engine creates an interactive visual editing experience for any components you choose. Finally, CloudCannon is for devs who want to own their data. With CloudCannon, your site literally lives in your repository, not in some proprietary database you have to query just right or write 1,000 schemas for. And for your clients, the CMS feels like editing a website, not like typing in a database. Now, let's get a little meta. Let me talk a bit about this video. If you've watched this far, here are my assumptions. You want to build static sites in Astro, but you need to make your sites editable by non-devs. You also already have a good grasp of Astro. Now, we won't be writing a lot of code in this video, but I also won't be explaining the nuances of Astro as we go. My goal is simply to help you see the benefits of using CloudCannon and to see if it might be a fit for your needs. Finally, this is not intended to be a step-by-step setup guide for CloudCannon and Astro. I'm going to focus more on the benefits of CloudCannon and offer a few examples of how to set up your code. But again, my goal is that at the end of this video, you'll have a good enough understanding of how CloudCannon works that you can make an informed decision and have a good idea of where to start. So, what will we cover in this video? We're going to break it up into 3 sections. First, I'll show you how to import an existing Astro site for basic data editing in CloudCannon. Here, we'll be using the website from my recent Astro blog series as our starting point. If you'd like to get better with Astro, I'll leave a link in the description so you can check out that free 3.5-hour course. In the second section of the video, we'll explore Bookshop, CloudCannon's powerful visual editor. I'll show you how to progressively enhance a basic CloudCannon site with live editable components. Finally, we'll finish the video exploring a full site built with CloudCannon and Bookshop from the ground up. We'll see the power of the visual editor in action and even check out some extra enhancements, like this site theme selector that dynamically adjusts the entire site based off of a few user-selected colors. All right, enough talking, let's jump in. All right, let's go ahead and get started with section 1, which is all about a simple import of an existing Astro site into CloudCannon. Now you can see the kind of second stage of this is what's called adding Bookshop, and that's what we've got right here. So hang tight, we'll get to that eventually where you can actually have a customer come in here and select stuff, but this requires a little bit more work on your end. So I want to start with just the most simple and basic version of this. Now you can actually follow along if you want to by going to the Astro Starter Guide, and I will try to remember to add a link to this in the description. We're just going to walk through this ourselves together. Now, again, this works best if you already have a pre-built Astro site. So for instance, we're going to use a site that I've already created in the past, this Astro blog site that has blog posts here you can see. You can also go to, let's see if it'll actually load. There we go. All right, you go to About page as well. There's some other basic stuff like on the blog page, the actual landing page, there's pagination, so you can jump back and forth. There's categories inside these posts. You can come down here and see blog category tags or related posts and jump around between stuff. So all that to say, that's what we're going to do, and it works best if you already have an existing Astro site. Now, the other thing I should mention is that you should have this up on GitHub or something else, and I'm assuming if you work with clients, you probably already do that. But the nice thing about CloudCannon is you kind of use the same process you're used to. You have your code, you push it up to your repository, CloudCannon watches that, much like Netlify CI or anything else like that, and then builds your site off of that. So you own your content, and it's the same content you would normally expect. So over here, this is all the content I own, and this is what CloudCannon will use to build the site. Now, like I mentioned, with this kind of basic import, it's really helpful if you have data content, because that's what CloudCannon can look at and automatically allow people to edit in a visual way. So for instance, I've got all my content from my posts inside Markdown files inside of the content collections for Astro. So automatically, as soon as we import this, CloudCannon will figure all this out, and you can just send this off to your client and they can update posts very easily, add new posts very easily, because this is all just Markdown data files. Now, one of the cool things about using CloudCannon is that it figures out all that schema stuff for you. You don't have to do all that when it comes to this basic import. So enough talking, let's actually get this thing up and running. So I'm going to come back over this way and come to the sites, and you can start with either a template or you can build with your own files. That's what we're going to do, right? Because we're going to pull it from that GitHub account. So first of all, let's come over here. We'll just call this like Astro CloudCannon blog or something like that. And then we're going to choose our source, and we're going to choose this GitHub repository. Now, right now, I don't have access to my GitHub account, so I'm going to need to click Install the GitHub app, and it's going to ask to install itself, and I will allow that. And then it redirects me here just like that. So really easy to get set up and running. Now, I'm going to come inside here and search for CloudCannon, Astro CloudCannon. That's one we're going to use. And then I'm going to use an existing branch, and I've got both a main branch and a section 1 setup. So I actually want to use this section 1 setup because I want to change stuff here and allow you to follow along with me if you want to from the main. So I'm going to click Sync Files, and that should start the process. Now, while it's thinking, it looks like it might already be done, but let me come back over this way. If you want to follow along with me, you can go ahead and come to the code here and just download a zip of this code, open it up, and then push it up to your own repository and do the same thing I'm about to do, which I'm doing off this section 1 setup, which for now is the same as this main branch, but eventually we're going to make some changes to it. Okay, so like that, it's already done. All right, real quick and easy, and it's identified it as an Astro site automatically, and it's gone ahead and added command line options that you would expect. Now you can do additional things like adding environmental variables. So let's say you have, some kind of secret key and value pair that you need to have stored. You can add that here. You can also change this up. So like if you're using PNPM, that might be an install command you would change, or the build command the same kind of way. By default, it knows that Astro puts everything in a dist folder when it's done building. So that's what we're going to leave it at. So all this is correct. There are other caching options if you want to speed up your builds, or advanced options, which you shouldn't need to touch any of this stuff. Again, it kind of figures it out for you. So I'm just going to click Build Site, and you're going to see that we've got everything up and running automatically. All right, just like that. That was probably 35 seconds or so, but I just sped it up for you. I've got a site, and I can click here, and this is my site, and everything is up, live, and running. The same exact thing I showed you in dev now exists on the web at an address that they created for us, but you can, of course, set up your own domain if you want to as well. So you would just do that over here in the domains. But just like that, that's all I have to do. Now, there are a couple things you want to do, and you want to start with creating a CloudCannon configuration file. So I'm going to go ahead and click this, and this opens up this kind of editor view. Let me zoom in just a touch to make it a little bit easier to see. And I can come in here and add a bunch of different things, and this tells CloudCannon essentially what's in my project. Now, it's done a pretty good job of guessing already by building everything. You can see it did a great job there, but I can give it additional items. So for instance, if I open this up, I might want additional access points here in the sidebar. I can always access any of my files here, and it will look just like this, and basically edit live in the browser if I want to, just editing the code files, but I'm not going to do that to like a collaborator or a client. I'm going to have them just edit more in a friendly CMS. So I can tell CloudCannon what I want to show up in that sidebar. For instance, here under the collections config. So all I have to do is define these things. Let's say I want to call one of them posts, or we could say like blog or something like that. Let's just call it posts. And then I'll come in here and indent once again. This is YAML. And then I'll say the path needs to be at my src, content, and blog. Now, why did I do that? Well, if I come back over this way, it's src, content, blog. That's what I'm saying. These files right here, I want them to be able to edit or add to or all that kind of stuff. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. The only other thing I'm going to do is change, let's see, right here. I don't need to tell it where the collections or the data or any of this stuff is right here, but I will go ahead and say that the static files, these are the ones that are not processed by Astro's engine and all that, will be in the public directory. And that's just how Astro works by default. This public stuff, this will all go to the root of the server. So just telling it that. And then if I want to upload new images here, I want this to be in public images or assets images, public images. Yeah, just like that. Okay, so just public images, and then those should be ready to go. Now, you're going to notice that as soon as I click save, it's going to do a couple of things. Number one, it's going to ask me if I want to confirm that, and I'll say yes, and then it will upload them and commit them for me. Now, that's going to push it all up to my repository. That means if I come back over this way and I go ahead and sync and pull that all down, now I've got this CloudCannon config right here. So it's gone ahead and done that, and it's just added it again as a new commit. So everything is up and running, and I can edit it here and push it back the other way, and just like that, everything should work. Now, here's the magic. We've done no setup, right? We basically just published the blog, but if I come back over this way, maybe I should zoom back out as well, and I come in here. Now I've got this sidebar that says posts, and right like that, all these posts are available for me. So I can come in here and click, and if I send this off to a client, you can see that all the front matter is right here, and then all the content is right here. So they can just come in here and add stuff, add images, format it however they want to. It's just figured all this out for me, and I didn't have to do any of this. Now, hopefully they're not writing in Latin, so they won't get all these squiggly lines, but you can see we've even got spell check directly in the browser. So anyhow, really easy to get started with, and this right here, this title, date, author, image, description, all this stuff is just the front matter. Now, there are actually a couple different views you have in CloudCannon, and you can see them if you click this right here. So you've got the content editor, that's what we're viewing right here. You've got the data editor, which essentially just looks at the front matter, and then you've got the source editor. Now, the source editor literally is just your file. So this is your plain old markdown file. And all of this right here, this title, date, author, image, description, draft, all this stuff is what shows in the sidebar on the content editor. So it's just different ways of looking at the same kind of information. Now, here's the cool thing. Let's say I come in here and I say like, hi, all right? As soon as I save this, what is it going to do? It's going to ask me if I want to, it'll commit it, and then immediately it's ready and published. So as it processes that, I'll open the sidebar again here. You can see its status is changing, and as soon as it's done building, that will be live on the website. But not only that, again, I can come back here and pull everything back in, and if I open in, what was it, post 1? Post 4, I think. All right, so post 4, come back over this way, and hi is already there. All right, I didn't even have time to look at it. All right, so hi has already been pulled in, and automatically it's working. If I come back over this way and we look at whatever post 4 is, post 4 right here starts with hi. All right, so this is live as well. So really easy for a client to edit stuff if you just have plain old markdown files. So if you're using content collections for things other than posts, like you can say like, hey, I want to give them access to adding cards on the homepage, and it all pulls from this one collection, you may not need to do anything else besides just simply upload your stuff to CloudCannon and configure nothing else, and it just figures it out for you. Now, it's super smart in figuring out what kind of fields these should be. So you can tell that this is a string field. It says title. Because I named it this date in the front matter, it's already figured out that this should be a date field. Author, it's a string field. Now, this is a nested object here, and you can see that now I've got access to both of these. However, you can see right here, this is a string, and it really should be an image file. So you can actually say, hey, good try, CloudCannon, but let me help you a little bit. And we're going to show you how to do that in just a second. But all of that to say, here's like a Boolean. It can tell that this is a Boolean. Here again is a category. Now I can give this an array of items that you have to choose between as well. Another way to kind of tell CloudCannon what your data actually is. Before I do any of that though, I want to come back over here and let's say I change this to like buy. All right, so let's say you're a developer now, you're changing stuff on the site, whether it's something that they can interact with or not, and I come in here and save this. I can just now come over here and commit this and say something like update post 4, and then I'll go ahead and commit this, and then I'll push it up. So as soon as I've done that, I'm going to come back here, and probably before I even get a chance to, it should start to see that and then update my site automatically. There you go. Status, it's already changing, and it knows what's going on. As soon as it's done, I'm going to come back over here. This should update, and it will say buy. All right, just like that, now it says buy, and again, so you can kind of push either direction. So either change it here in the CMS or change it in your code, and because you own all the files as you just commit, then you get the new updated thing wherever you're at. Obviously, you want to make sure you pull down files when you're actually coding over here, but hopefully you're used to doing that anyhow. Okay, so one other thing, like I mentioned, let's go ahead and update the type of image this should be. This SRC should be an image and not a string, so the type of data this should be. And we can do that in the CloudCannon configuration. Now, you can actually do this in a couple different ways, but let's go ahead and come in here and open the files and come over here to CloudCannon configure. I can also come over here and open CloudCannon, and this should be the same exact thing. So maybe just because this is bigger, let's go ahead and add it in down here. Now we've got a couple different ways to do this, but what I want to do is come in here and I want to add an underscore inputs. And now I'm going to do is name the type of input, and that was SRC, right? I want to say that this needs to be a type of image. So this is a global configuration file. So anytime I have a field called SRC, it's going to set this as an image. Now that's what all of mine are anyhow, so that's just fine. There are other kind of configuration files, and they kind of cascade down like CSS. So you've got a global configuration file, a collections configuration, front matter, and then containing structure, so the actual item itself. So I'm just going to focus on this global configuration file for now, and we'll just set this type of input here. So let me go ahead and save this. Let's come back over here. We'll say like update CloudCannon config file, and then I'll go ahead and commit this. And then let's push it up. And once again, let's jump back over this way and look at the dashboard, and I'll come into the posts, and you can see it's already working on the status right here. And let's come in here to YCSS. Now inside here, I should be able to come in here, and once this is done, I'll refresh the page here, and you'll see that this has changed from a string type to an image type. All right, so we've refreshed, we've come in here, and automatically I get a preview of the image. Everything is set and ready to go. Pretty cool, right? So you can actually tell CloudCannon, hey, you didn't quite get this data type right, but it will guess on kind of the basis of the naming of it. So if I had said like image SRC and not had this as a nested object, it would have probably figured it out for me automatically. All right, so with that said, that's how people would come in here and update this post stuff itself. And they don't have to know anything about your code. All they have to do is be able to type in their browser, and they're set and ready to go. Now you'll notice that I can actually add a new post as well. So I can come in here and click add post, and it will kind of default to, I think, the most recent post. So it's adding in this category and an author and a title. So we could say like example post, something like that. And I can set this to today's date, which is the 21st, where I'm at. We'll keep that the same, come in here, and I can keep this or I can upload a new one. So let's go ahead and upload a new one. So I'll just choose this post example image and click open, and immediately I see it right there. So I could say like, I don't know, like code light stuff. All right, and now we've got that. And we should probably also add some data here. So I could say like, hi, this is a post. And then, you know what we should do is we should ask ChatGPT to write us something. So give me a post about coding that is, I don't know, 400 words with at least 3 headings. All right, don't ever do this. All right, you can start with this, but make sure you actually write whatever you're doing. Because if somebody wants ChatGPT to tell them something, they could just ask themselves. So let's go ahead and grab all this. Actually, I think there's a way here to just paste those responses. Let's do that. Okay, and that was just something called Raycast, and I've got Raycast AI, so I can do that. All right, let's go ahead and click save, and it will ask us, are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. And then immediately, if I come back over here, obviously in the posts themselves, now I'll have a new post once it's done building. And there it is, this example post right here. And here's all the content I had, the images, all that kind of stuff. Now if I come back over this way, once it's done building, I should see that post live, and it should be right here once it's done building. All right, and just like that, I've got this example post and it's live. Now, of course, not to belabor the point, but if I come back over this way and I pull down those changes, let's come in here. Eventually, we're going to have this example post right here. So this is exactly what we did. all in CloudCannon, and now I get access to it in my code. So this is a really quick and easy way to get started with CloudCannon. Basically no configuration needed and stuff just works. Now I want to show you one other type of thing that you can do, and I'm going to come in here and we're going to add another thing to the CloudCannon configuration. Let's go ahead and just do it here in the browser, and I will probably zoom in since it's going to be small. So we've added this posts path. I want to add one more type, and that would be, we're just going to call it like data, or how about like site data? And you can name this in a bunch of different ways. It will basically take a camel case or kebab case or whatever kind of case and make it more user-friendly on the front end. But I'm just going to say that this path is my SRC data. Now, if I come back over this way, I'm pointing it to this folder right here. And this will have a navdata.js file and a sitedata.json file. So let's go ahead and take that, and we're going to commit it here. And then if I come over to the sidebar and we zoom back out to a reasonable amount, once it's done, it will actually add this directly to the sidebar here. Okay, so just like that, I've got the site data now in the sidebar. You can see how it's titled this and put spaces between it or capitalize the kind of the first letters of each. If I open this up now, you're going to see I only have one item in here. This is Astro Blog. What in the world is this? Well, if I open this up, you're going to notice that it's that JSON file that was right over here, the site data.json. So why is that the only file being pulled in? I've got two different files here. Well, like I mentioned, CloudCannon works best with data type files. There are kind of two file types that it works with. Either data files, and those can be things like JSON or YAML or even a CSV, or it also has content types, which would be things like Markdown or MDX, and soon MarkDoc support is coming. So this is the kinds of files that you can easily edit inside of the CloudCannon CMS. So in order to have access to the other items here, for instance, if I want to have access to the nav data, I need to convert this to actually be using JSON. So let's go ahead and switch that over to JSON, which I've just done quickly, and then I'll change this to be a JSON file. Now Astro is going to ask if it can update the import, so I'm going to let it do that. And that should be set and ready to go. And then let's see, this should just be an array like this. All right, now it's gone ahead and it is working. But if I come in here, you can see under components and nav, it's also updated this right here to be an import from the nav data.json. Now I should also probably sync my changes because I need to pull down those changes to the CloudCannon config file. But now it's basically grabbing that data file and importing it right here for these nav items. So it's working the exact same way. It's just now a JSON file instead of a JS file. All right, so with that said, let's come in here. We'll say for all these and this, and let's see. Oh, I need to add one more. Here we go. I'll say update JS file for data to JSON. All right, and then I'll go ahead and commit this and push it up. So if I come back over this way, this site data right here, it's seen that change, and now automatically it started to pull this in. Now I've got the nav data right here, which means I can come in here and you'll see that it's guessed fairly well about what this is. So it is a name and then it's a file path. All right, so it's grabbed both of those for me. Same thing with blog and file path. So that's working automatically, and I can just add new items to my nav menu just like this. Again, in a visual editor, this would be great for like a customer or client wanting to do this. So I could come in here and say something like best post or something, right? And then I come in here and click, and I can upload a new file. It's guessed that this is like an image file, so that's not quite going to work. I can explore existing files. Again, this should search my existing images, or I can come in here and just add a file URL. So let's say it's in blog, and then what was that, like example post, I think, was the slug post, and then I'll save this URL. So that means if I come in here and I save this, like this, and we open back up the sidebar, actually, let's just come over here to the live view, and I refresh. So I'm going to need to wait till this is done building. All right, like that. If I come back over here and refresh, now my best post link is right there. And now this pulls me to my example post that we wrote earlier. Looks like I did this in Markdown, and I should have done it in the visual editor. But anyhow, the point is the same, that I've added something to my navbar. So you might need to occasionally change a data type from like a JavaScript file to an actual JSON file if it's being used purely as data. So I know JSON is not as fun to write as JavaScript because you got to worry about all those commas, those trailing commas and quotation marks. But you can see the advantage is now your customer can come in here, client can come in here and quickly update their own nav data if they want to. All right, once you have all this stuff ready for a client, how do you actually invite them? Well, you can come down to a couple places, but one of them would be the settings, and come in here to collaborators or client sharing. Now, to add a collaborator means they have to have a CloudCannon account and sign in and all this kind of stuff, and they get access to your sites. either by organization or by your individual site. The other thing you can do is come in here and have client sharing. Basically what this does is they don't have to have a CloudCannon account. Instead, they just have to have a password, and then they can immediately start editing the data that you give them right over here. So that would be the way I would use it with a client, and that way they get access to what they need and nothing more than that. Now, there are a couple more user-friendly ways that are coming now, and by the time this video post should be live. One of those is when it comes to this CloudCannon config, you can see it's a little messy to come in here and try to remember exactly what needs to be put here. Well, there's a new kind of data editor that makes it a lot easier to work with. In fact, you've got links out to documentation as you need them. So you can see here, we've got this right here that points to the certain path, whatever that data happens to be. It gives you access to other things like filters and how you might want this to display. So lots of kind of additional features that you don't have to remember how all that configuration YAML file works. You can just jump over here to the data editor and it kind of walks you through it. And again, we've got other things we haven't even looked at yet, like a base URL. They let you adjust your global editing interfaces as well. This basically says which editors are enabled. So by default here, I've got the data and the source, but depending on the file type, you can also have a content or the visual editor as well. And you can set those up here. Here's that input that we created earlier. You can also say, hey, where should the data be if I want to use data throughout the site? And we haven't looked into that yet. Structures is another way of telling the CMS how you want data to be displayed and added to and all that kind of stuff. And editables we'll get into later, I think, as well. So anyhow, all that to say, there is a more user-friendly version, and this is what we'll be using the rest of the time as we move through this tutorial. Now, the point of this first section was to just say, hey, if you want to just get started with CloudCannon, and mostly your clients are just adjusting data files, then you can just use it with a basic import and keep writing your Astro sites however you want to. However, if you really want to optimize for CloudCannon, there are some things that you want to do when it comes to Astro, making sure, for instance, that you separate out your data from the way that you're processing that data. So that'll be something we talk about next time in the next little section here, where we're going to set up stuff with Bookshop, which is their visual editor. Now, one of the cool things about CloudCannon is a lot of these tools that you're interacting with are open source, so you can go and see how they're building this out. But you can see that right here, this is what we're going to do, is set it up so that we can add components directly in a visual way and see those changes take place live in the actual editor. All right, so that's section 2. I'll see you there. Of course, editing data files is great, but eventually you want to actually let clients come in here and edit this section. So what we're going to do is assume that you say, hey, most of my site is static, but I occasionally want to let people edit stuff live in a visual editor. To do that, we're going to need to add something called Bookshop. Now, this is the open sourced tool that CloudCannon has created, and it integrates with CloudCannon so that you can create these little sections like this where somebody can come and add a section or perhaps edit a section. And like most people, you probably don't want them just finagling around with whatever they want. That's probably why you got away from things like WordPress. So let's go ahead and just take one little section and update it so that one section can be edited in a visual editor just like this. And of course, they can still update the blog posts and all that kind of stuff, but how can we kind of selectively, progressively enhance the site with Bookshop? That's what we're going to do in this second section. Now, we are going to be following along generally with this tutorial under guides. It's called the Bookshop Astro Guide. Now, we're going to be following along with it very loosely. We might occasionally steal some things from it, just so I don't have to type them out. All right, and then couple other things here. Note that we have this new branch called Section 2 Bookshop, and that's what we're going to be working off of. That way, if you want to reference stuff in Section 1, you can do that, and we won't corrupt the code, but this is the exact same stuff that we ended last section on. All right, in order to be pulling from that, though, I need to come over here, come to my settings, and go to Source Syncing, and replace this branch. All I'm going to do is come in here and grab Section 2 and hit Change Branch. And what that will do is rebuild the site using that new branch, which should be the exact same thing as the old branch right now. And then finally, here's the actual site that we've been working on, and we can test out what we've done in the second section as we make changes. All right, so with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and make these changes in 5 steps. First of all, we're going to start with just installing Bookshop. So if I come back over here, you're going to see that we need a bookshop config.cjs file, and this needs to live in the source directory in a folder called Bookshop, and then finally right here. So why don't we go ahead and copy this, and I'll jump back over this way, and let's go ahead and create that right here. So we'll say Bookshop, and I'll do a /, which in VS Code will create that folder and allow us to do bookshop.config.cjs. Then I'll just go ahead and paste that in. So that's the first thing we need to do in this first step, which is installing Bookshop. Secondly, we need to install some dependencies. So this connects this Astro Bookshop to our project. So we're going to do it right here, and then we'll go ahead and also add this in a second. So let's come back over this way. I'm going to open up the local terminal here, and we're just going to go ahead and install that. And then again, I need to grab this import, and we're going to open up the Astro config.mjs, and I'll just import it right here. Let's say something like add for Bookshop. And then all I need to do is come in this list of integrations and add Bookshop like this. All right, and then we'll do the same thing here, add for Bookshop. So with all that done, let's close down that terminal here. That's the first step, which is just installing Bookshop. So let's come over here and create a commit. We'll say install Bookshop, and I'll go ahead and sync those changes. If we come back over here and we look at this right here, we'll come to the dashboard. In just a second here, this should start to rebuild because we've done the first step, installing Bookshop. Now, the second step will be to identify sections of our site that we want our client to be able to edit. Of course, they can already edit the blog post. We did that last time. However, there might be other sections that we say, hey, let's let them just play around with the text here or add a new image or things like that. So as I look through this, we've got like this about page. This has a very similar header to this section right here. Of course, there's some different styling and things like that, but this might be a good candidate if we want to say, hey, this will give them an edit point here on this about page and on the home page if we choose to add it there, and it would work on both of those, and they could just edit the text here to say what they want, change out the image if they need to, that kind of thing. So we identified a section. For now, we're just going to focus on the about page, and I'll let you kind of apply this to the index page if you'd like to. Now, these Bookshop components that will be live editable can be either Astro or React, as long as you're importing that React in an Astro file. Now, there's one very important caveat, and that is if I look in here, I've just got an image, and I've also got text right here, and then I've got this link component. If I jump back over here, we can go ahead and look at the about page right here. And I'll close this down. You can see that this is just a main layout. That's an Astro thing. This is just HTML, just plain old HTML. And then finally, we hit this link component. The caveat is that anything you have that's live editable has to be able to be edited in a browser. So you can't use things that are server side in order to edit in a browser using Bookshop. So if I open up this link component by holding down Command, you're going to notice one thing, and that is this Astro icon. Now, Astro icon does some kind of server side magic when you're in dev mode and then when you're building, so we can't use that if we're going to be using Bookshop for this particular component. Not a huge deal, because what we can do is just basically duplicate the same idea for Bookshop, and that way they can still choose between like a primary and a secondary and all that kind of stuff. We just won't have icons in there, which is just fine by me. Now, just like before, we saw CloudCannon tries to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you, and that's the same when it comes to Bookshop components. Eventually, if I come back over this way, what we're going to do is tell Bookshop, hey, anything in this components directory, go ahead and assume is a Bookshop component. Now, some of these, like this link component, I think the footer as well, and the category cloud, they're going to do some server-side stuff. So just to make it a little bit simpler on ourselves, what I want to do is go ahead and rename this to something like components original. And that means essentially that we can just redirect everything that was pointing right here to instead point to components original / whatever it was. And that way we don't have to worry about like making sure that Bookshop isn't trying to do server-side stuff. So hopefully that makes sense why we're doing that. Of course, if you had a full site that was really integrated with Bookshop and built from the ground up, you wouldn't have to do this. You could just leave it as components. Or you could go through and comb out individual ones and move them to a separate directory, but for now, just to keep it as simple as possible, that's what we're going to do. Now let's go ahead and hit Command Shift and F. We're going to search for components / just like that. And this will allow us just to quickly rename everything, and I can come in here and just say components original. I'll do a / and then just replace all of these. Now, just to make sure that everything is building correctly, I'm going to come inside here. I'll just do npm run dev. And assuming that built okay for the homepage, I'm assuming that all of our component imports are now working. If they're not, we'll fix that in a second. Okay, so all we've done is basically move things over to their own components original directory. Now what I want to do is extract out that logic, if I come back over here, for this about section to its own special Bookshop component. Now, the cool thing about Bookshop components is they're just Astro components, all right? Or again, they can be React components. So we don't have to do anything super special for them as far as actually building them. So if I come back over this way, let's go ahead and create a new directory called components. Again, this would be where Bookshop is going to look. And then let's go ahead and put this inside of another directory called hero. And inside this, we'll have hero.astro. Now, why am I kind of nesting this? Well, if you get around to wanting to swap around icons, you need a second file in here that we're not going to do in this section of the tutorial, but I'll show you it in the final section. And that's a config for this exact thing. And that way in the visual editor, you can quickly swap between them, and it kind of can fill out the component, whatever it happens to be, with default information and kind of knows how to use it. So generally you're going to want to nest these like this, but for now we're just going to do it just like that. Now let me also come in here and let's grab this pages directory and we'll go over here to about. Now, if we look back at this, this is the section right here. We want to pull out all of this and make it its own little editable component. So let's just comment this out. I'll come over here to the hero component, and for now, we're just going to set some front matter up here. We'll just drop this right in here. Now remember, this link component we don't want to use anymore because it does have some of that server-side stuff. So let me come over here, and I'm just going to strip out all of this. Let's see, right here, we'll just grab all of this and basically do it ourselves over here. So right here, in fact, let's leave it there so we can grab the content as we need it. All we're going to do is say that this href will eventually point to something. For now, we'll just leave it like that. This class list we no longer need, but it's going to have link. It's going to have is filled, and it's going to have either primary or secondary. That's just how I set up the project to start with. So let's come in here and we'll say class, and this will be link, filled, and then it will either have primary or secondary. So perhaps the best thing to do would be to come in here like this, and then we'll just swap these out. That way I can do this temperate literal string, and eventually we'll have the style that's put right inside here. Let's get rid of all this then, and we don't need an icon because we're not going to have that. And now I'll just replace all of these things for now like this. Let's get rid of this right here and then save the file, and Astro should reformat that for us. Now it's looking for style that doesn't yet exist, so we'll put all this stuff in just a second. In fact, maybe we should do that now. So as we look through this, we're going to just write a basic Astro component. Now I should mention it's possible that you already had something like this componentized, which I would have done if I were to rebuild this project. There's no point in having this just be hard-coded both here and on the homepage, but I'm sure I tried to do it just for simplicity when I built that site originally. So let's come in here and kind of think through what we're going to need. I know I'm going to have a title. This would be right here, and I'll probably also apply this to the ARIA label as well. I'll also have content. That's what we'll call this right here. I'll also have an image that will hold the SRC, the alt, the width, and the height. And then finally, I will also have a link. These will all come from astro.props. Again, these are just as you'd expect coming from normal Astro kind of writing components. Now, what I want to do is come inside here. We'll change this to link.style, so this will be an object. In fact, maybe I'll just scaffold this out, and maybe I'll just add it as props, so that way you can kind of see exactly what we're going to be doing here. So the title will just be a string. The content will just be a string. The image will be an object, and this will have an SRC, which is a string, an alt, which is a string. The width will be a number, and then the height will also be a number. And then finally, we'll have a link. Once again, this will be an object. We'll have an href. This will be a string. We'll have a style. This will be one of two things. It'll either be primary or it will be secondary. If you're not familiar with TypeScript, don't worry. I'm just kind of scaffolding this out, and you'll kind of get this as a bonus if you want it. And finally, I'll have text of the link, and this will just be a string as well. Okay, so that's what we need. That's what's coming in right here. Now, the other benefit now is I can come in here and just simply start typing. So like title, you can see that I get IntelliSense now in this as well. So for all these sections, we're just going to replace this text here with the default text that I'm getting up from above. So let me go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back with you.
2 hours later.
All right, so just like that, now I've switched all those out. And again, this is just a normal Astro component for now. So I could come back over here and we can just replace all of this with what I need in my component. So I could do that just by looking for my hero and go ahead and import that from up top here. And the other advantage of now this IntelliSense is I know exactly what I need in here. So I need my title. We'll call this About Me. I need description. And I'll just paste in some lorem ipsum since that's all it was to start with. Maybe let's cut this back just a touch. But next I'll need my image. And this is an object, so I can just wrap it like that. And I should be able to grab all of this and just drop this in here. Now, since this is an object, I need to grab all of these, replace them with colons, and just do commas at the end. And since we said these needed to be numbers, I'll go ahead and remove those like that so they can be numbers. And then finally, we're going to do the same thing with the link. And I should be able to come in right down here and grab all this as well. Okay, so in this second section, that's all about identifying which components we want to use in Bookshop. What we've done is found a section. Now we've moved it over to make it its own little component. Now it's very possible, again, that you'd already done this before, and that's totally fine. What do we call this? Description. This should be content, I think. So it's possible that you already did this, and you can kind of skip right through this if you have a site existing that's already using a component for a section that you want to use Bookshop with. Now, one more time, let me reiterate before we move on to step 3 that you cannot have anything that's more server-side stuff in here. Of course, you can include assets like PNGs or SVGs or JPEGs or WebP assets. They're automatically imported and you can use them in that visual editor. However, other asset types are not supported and neither are like server-side things. All right, so with that said, this is the second section, which is identifying components you want to use for Bookshop and ensuring that they actually are components like we've done here. So I'm going to go ahead and come over here and we'll just come up top here and say something like prepare components for Bookshop. And then I'll go ahead and commit this and sync up my changes. Now let's jump over this way and let's make sure that this is syncing. There we go. All right, so perfect. That synced and worked. And if I go ahead and save this, everything should look the exact same. We've just changed around some of the text here. And let's see, we had about here. So yeah, we did change something because I think it shortened. So we actually got to see that as well. So we've done 2 steps. We've installed Bookshop. And secondly, we've identified a component for Bookshop and ensured that it actually is a component in Astro that's passing props and all that kind of stuff. Now, our third step is to separate data from the rendering. Now, it kind of depends on how you build your Astro site. This may or may not be something you need to do massive changes for, but for this one little component, what we want to do is basically take all the data here and strip it out from the actual rendering. So the way we're going to do that is I'm going to open up the sidebar over here, and we've got this content collection right here for our blog posts. What I want to do is create a separate content collection for my page. Since this entire page is this component, that's what I'm going to do. So I'll come in here and I'm going to add a new file. Actually, it'll be a new folder first called pages. And then inside here, I'm going to have about.md. All right, so this is where we're going to build the page itself. Now, what I need to do is create a content collection. So what I can do is come in here and copy all this and just paste it down this way. And then I want to change this to call it pages. And we need to make sure we export this at the end. And now let's close down this sidebar and just add a couple things. So we're going to go ahead and keep that title because we want that. We also will have a description. Now both of these are strings. And if you're not familiar with content collections, I've done a video on it in the past. They've since updated a couple things, but it still should mostly help you along your way. Now these are connected not to the actual component, but to the page itself. In fact, if I open up this page over here, you can see I've got a title and I've got a description. Now we need to basically provide all of this stuff as well. Now, because you might have multiple things in here, what I'm going to do is just kind of title it as hero component and not add in all this stuff, although you could certainly do that as well. But just to keep it real simple, I'm going to come over here and we're just going to have something called hero component. And we'll just have this to be a z.any. All right, so not super helpful when it comes to type checking, but in this case, I just want to kind of go quickly here so you can kind of see how you do it rather than spending a bunch of time templating something out that you probably won't have exactly in your project. So again, what we're trying to do is separate the data from the rendering. So the rendering is going to be this about page right here. The data I want to live in this about.md file, which again is part of my content collections. So let's go ahead and add some front matter up here. And basically all I want to do is take everything that's templated here and put it over here in my about.md file. So for instance, I would want this title and this description. So I can just copy it out just like this, and we can drop this in right here. Now, once again, I can make some changes here. I don't need these, so I can grab both of those, and I can drop this down to the next line. Now, remember, I have that other thing called hero component. And I said the shape could be anything, but basically it's just going to be an object with all the title fields that I already have over here in my Astro component. So again, I can just grab this right here, and I can drop this in here. Now, once again, I've got some changes to make, so let's go ahead and do that. For all of these, let's see, I don't need these. Instead, these can just be colons. Same thing here, I can make this a colon and remove the kind of the double brackets here. And then finally, remember to remove all these commas. You don't need these either. And I should have said here, you can remove both of these. Okay, so just like that, all we've done is take everything that was templated over here and put it in our about.md file. So what we're trying to do is separate out the data from the actual rendering. That is step 3. Okay, so step 3 is done. Let's come over here. We'll say, we'll just call this separate out data from rendering. And again, we'll just sync these changes. Let's come back over here and make sure that this is all working properly before we move on. All right, as expected, that should all work and nothing was actually changed as far as the rendering. We just added in this new content collections and step 3, which is separating out that data. Now in step 4, this is the real crucial one. What we need to do is now create those rendering components. So if I come back over this way, the first thing I want to do, if I open up this Explorer view over here, is I want to take this About page and I actually want to embed it inside of a new layout. So all I'm going to do is grab this and call it About Layout. And then I'll just move it up to the Layout directory. And we'll move it. And Astro should have changed all the imports that you need. Now we're going to be stripping out a lot of these, so hopefully we don't have to do too much. But if it didn't, you'll want to make sure that you change them manually yourself. Now we'll come back to this in just a second, but the next thing I want to do is create a dynamic route. Now in Astro, you can do this with bracketed syntax, and I'll just go ahead and do it as a ... This allows for more flexibility. We won't be using it in this case, but just so that you've got that there if you need it. Now let's close down the sidebar and then create some front matter up here. Now this is a dynamic route, which means in Astro you have to get static paths. This tells Astro how to render this since it's a dynamic route. So we'll say export async function. We'll call this get static paths. This is what you need to call it. And this is just normal Astro kind of stuff. Now what I want to do is grab anything from my new pages content collection. So I'll just call this pages. We'll do await, get collection. Now I need to grab my pages. Now you might see here that I'm only seeing blog. And the reason that's the case is because we have yet to run npm run dev, which is what generates those types. So let me go ahead and close this out. Open up down here. We'll do npm run dev. Since we've created that content collection, we need to actually allow it to update the types right here, which is what it's now done. So I'll go ahead and close that down. And that means I should be able to come in here now and come in here and search for pages. And there we go. Now all I want to do is return, and I want to map through the pages, which in this case I know is only going to be one, but I'm going to take the page and I want to return two things. First of all, I want to go ahead and return params. And this will just be the slug because that's what I named the file. The slug will be the page.slug. Again, this just comes directly from the content collection. And then secondly, I'll have props, and this will just be the page itself, which will give us all that front matter. Then now actually inside the rendered route, I want to grab what I'm going to just call page, and this will be from the astro.props.page, which will be right here. So I'm getting this and adding it to the actual route itself. Now, what do I want to do with this dynamic route? Well, all I want to do is dump it inside this about layout. So I'll come inside here and we'll say about layout, and that should import for me. And then I'll simply pass all that page data. Now, the way that Bookshop works is because it's used to static and content files, it's going to look for the front matter property. So what I want to do is pass it front matter, and then I'll just pass it here, my page.data. Now, where's this page.data coming from? Well, whenever you receive a page, the data is all the front matter that comes along with it. So that's why I'm passing it to front matter right here. In fact, just to show you how this works, if I come in here, we open up this again, and we run this once again. And then I'll need to come over this way and just look at localhost 3000. And then once I hit this route right here, you'll see we're going to get some errors because we haven't finished everything, but we should, I think, it will give us what I'm wanting, which is just to show you the console log. I don't see it here, but it looks like I did not spell this correctly. Okay, so let's try this again. There we go. All right, so it is actually working. And here it is. So I've got an ID, a slug, a body. This is what I'm getting from Astro's content collection. So nothing CloudCannon related here, but here's my data. This would be all the front matter in that astro.md file we created last time. All right, so all I'm doing is saying, hey, all this data stuff, that's my front matter. So I'm going to close this back down here. I'm glad we caught that before we send it up. And I just want to receive this front matter in my Astro layout. So that's right over here, this about layout. In this case, I don't need to add all this manually here because I should be getting it from my props. So I should be able to come in here. And here I should be able to spread in my astro.props.frontmatter.hero component. And I just want to spread in all those properties. Now this is kind of long to write out, so maybe let's make this a little bit easier on ourselves. Let's get rid of this link. We don't need this anymore. But I'll come inside here and just say I want my title, my description, and my hero component. And I want all these from the astro.props.frontmatter. That's what we passed in, remember? Now what I can do is spread in just this right here. Then for the title, I can obviously just give this the title. And for the description, this is for the actual page, I can give this the description. So let me walk through that one more time in case it's confusing. So what we've done is create a dynamic route here that's basically looking for anything in my pages collection. Now in this case, since I only have one, I just went ahead and made that layout an about layout. And what I've done is just said, hey, let's go ahead and grab this, give me all the front matter, and I want to dump this into this wrapper component. This wrapper component right here receives that and then adds it in right here. Now, if you're thinking, you might be saying, well, wait a second, I want these pages to be different depending on what I pass in the front matter, so I don't always want a hero component here. Well, we're going to get there in the third section where I show you how you can be more dynamic in these, but it's a little bit more complex, so I want to use a simpler example with a single component that you always know to expect, and then in that final section, I'll show you how to use this in a more dynamic way when you're ready to build in that way. Now we've got all this front matter for the hero component, which is all this right here, and it's being dumped in right here into the hero component. Now, in order for Bookshop to make this live, I need to do three more things. One, I need to add Bookshop live to this right here. This tells CloudCannon that this is a component you want to be able to live edit. Now, the other thing I need to do is come all the way over here to, let's see, this getting started. And when it comes to using these components, I'm going to scroll down just so you can see where to find this as well for configure live editing. This is the command we need to grab. Now, these commands just power that live editing experience. They don't do anything for the actual build themselves. So let me come back over here. We'll go ahead and install those. And then finally, actually under the same section here, I need to add a special file called post build. Now, there are a bunch of ways you can interact with your build on CloudCannon, and you do most of them in this .cloudcannon folder. You can have a pre-build step, a post-build step. You can have a couple things like that where it'll actually run scripts before or after your build or during your build, depending on what your needs are. In this case, we do need this post-build, and I'll show you what that does here in a second. Let's go ahead and open the sidebar, and this will just be in the root of the directory here. Again, this is a .cloudcannon file /post build. It doesn't have an extension, just like that. We're just going to paste in this npx bookshop generate. So those are the three other things we need to do to get this working properly. Now, what's actually happening here? Well, under the hood, Bookshop creates CloudCannon structures for each of your components. This allows your team to add and remove component objects in the CMS, so in the actual visual editor. When your site is loaded into CloudCannon's visual editor, an additional Bookshop script is loaded. This script loads your component files into the browser alongside your Bookshop engine that understands both Astro and React components, depending on what you have. So that's step 4, a very important one with a lot of nuance to it. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's come back over here, and I'll go ahead and commit this. We'll say something like add live rendering. Remember, we separated out the rendering and the data. So let's go ahead and push this up, but we're going to need to make one more change for us to actually use this in practice. Because right now, if I look over here, I don't have any way to access those pages. So we need to actually update our CloudCannon config. Now, I mentioned in the last section that there's a new way to interact with that configuration file. In fact, if I come over here to Files and CloudCannon config right here, this was the old way. As of today, the day that this video publishes, you can now come in here and choose Data Editor. Now, here's the really cool thing here. You don't have to remember all the different options you have available to you. It'll just walk you through different things you might want to add. So like, here's that image, like I mentioned earlier, that we added to say, hey, whenever I have an SRC input, go ahead and make that an image type. Now, we're going to keep stuff very simple. If I come back up top here, you're going to see I've already got my posts and my site data. I want to add another collection, and this collection is just going to be called Pages. So I'll go ahead and add that. And then over here, you can see it gives me all the different options I have, including a bunch that we never even looked at before. So we're going to keep this pretty simple, but the path is where this lives. And again, this is in my SRC content. And remember, we did blog for over here. What we're going to do for this one is obviously Pages. That's the content collection that we created earlier. Now, I do want these to be output when I make changes, so I need to make sure I check this. And then there are a bunch of other things I can do down this way. For instance, this URL. Now, for each of these, I want them to be based on the actual slug that I pass in. So here, I want this to be a dynamic value, and that would just be the slug of the actual post itself. Now, if I scroll down, there's one other thing I want to do, and that is I want to make sure that I can actually edit this using a visual editor. So you can choose the editors for each file. In this case, I want it to be a visual editor, so that by default, the visual editor is used whenever I'm looking at anything in my Pages directory. So I'm going to go ahead and save this right here, and click Save, and this should update for me. Now, just to prepare for this, let's come over here and toggle the menu. And in just a second here, we should see a new Pages directory. There it is right here. And I think I see an error we made, but just to make sure, let's open this first and see what happens. Yeah, no preview is available. So what I did is I added, let's come back over here to my files, CloudCannon. And since it's just a quick change, I'll use just the normal source editor. I just need to have single quotation marks, not both of those there. All right, and we'll resave this and come over here. All right, just like that, we should be done. If I come over here, now we actually see a preview of the page. And if I click on this, it uses our visual editor. Now, of course, I can always come to the sidebar and edit it, but the whole point was so I could click in here and now get this little pop-up where I can change this and it will edit live. So I could say like, hey, and add a little wave emoji, and all this is being updated live for me. I can also come into the image and actually update a new image if I want, change around all these details as well. Or I could come over here to the link component and change these. Now, remember we had two options here, primary or secondary. If I come in here and change this to secondary, that updates for me automatically. Now, just like we did for the image, we can actually tell it exactly the types available here. So we can even give it an array and say, hey, only allow secondary or primary. But for now, just so you see, this is how everything is working. Close this down, click Save, and I'll go ahead and save this. And note that even if you're making changes like on the back end and you push them up, you automatically get this little indicator. So like if your client is editing the site, you push up a change, they'll see, hey, just a second here, this is going to be updated soon. Now, if I come over here though, this is to the live site and refresh. Now I see those changes we made in the visual editor. So let's quickly think through those steps we made one more time. If I come over here and open my package.json, this will remind us of the first step we made, which is to install all the Astro things we needed. So we added this Astro Bookshop thing that was added to our Astro config, and we added it in right here. Second step was to identify certain sections that we wanted to make editable. and we turned that into an actual component that we could use. We simply called that our hero component. And this was it right here. And again, you may have already had a component ready and waiting, but just in case you didn't, I thought it'd be good to build this out together. Thirdly, we separated out the data from the actual rendering. If I open up the Explorer once again, we did that inside of our content collection. We added a new config for pages directory, and then we added our about page directly in here. We added all the data we needed for the page in the markdown file. Fourthly, we created those rendering components. So for instance, we had this dynamic slug that then passed everything we needed to the about layout. It grabbed it from our pages collection and sent that on as the front matter. The about layout then took that and passed it to our hero component and then made sure that Bookshop Live was available. We also added a bunch of things to allow it to generate properly. So if I come back over here, all these dev dependencies here, they don't affect the production build at all, but they help CloudCannon know how to process your live editable files. In that fourth step, we also added a new directory here called .cloudcannon and added this post-build script to tell it to generate all of our Bookshop components. It does that by using this config and then looking inside here, anything inside of our components directory. It then renders and attaches all the structure we need to be able to live edit it. You can provide this yourself if you want, but since it does it for us, that makes it really easy whenever you're making changes to your source directory. Now you can get more specific and tell CloudCannon exactly what your structures are, but since this generate command does kind of the basic job for you, that's the right place to start unless you need to give it more specific instructions. And then finally, as the fifth and final step, if I go ahead and pull in all these changes, we open up the CloudCannon config. I come inside here. What we did was we added a new section here for, pages right here. Now you can see all this extra stuff that data view for this added, but this also shows us what else we can do if we want to. For instance, you can say, hey, I don't want them to be able to add anything else, in which case you could just hit true, and that will not let them add any extra pages. Now we're ready for the third section, which is to look at an entire project built from the ground up with CloudCannon and Bookshop in mind. So I'm going to do that by coming back over here, and we're going to jump out this way, open up the menu, and I'm going to click on Sites right here. Now here's the site we've been working on, but I'm going to click Add New Site, and we're going to edit with a template. I'll come inside here, I want to choose Astro, and then this is the built-in template they give you. Now, I'm not connecting this to my GitHub right now or anything like that. We're just going to basically say, hey, build this site for us and let us look at this live. All right, and just like that, I've got a live site. If I come over here, this is the actual template site they've built out. The entire thing, start to finish, lots of different pages, a whole blog that has pagination and everything else. So you get a real look at exactly how to use this template. Now, let's go ahead and start by looking at something you're familiar with, and that would be our CloudCannon configuration file. Now, just because it's a little easier to view as a whole right here, let's walk through some of the things they've done. We already know that the data right here should correspond to this sidebar data right here, and it does. You can see though that they said, hey, I do not want them to be able to add additional data. So this kind of restricts what somebody who has access to the visual editor can do. That means if I come over here, I click on this data and I try to add stuff, there's no plus button. All right, I only get the data right here, and these are the things that I can change. Let's open up this cloud config again, and you can see that I also have posts. I point it to a content collection for blog. We already did that. Output gives me that, tells me what the URL should be. All that works just fine. Now here you can see I'm prioritizing the content editor because these are markdown files, but I can also switch to the visual editor if I want to. I give it add options and tell it, hey, whenever they go to add a new post, here's what I want you to name it. Here's the default schema, and it'll pass it in right down here. And then here's the icon I want you to use. So you can see how you can get a lot more detailed if you need it. Now, when it comes to the schema, we'll look at this in just a second, but for now, I want you to look at these inputs. Remember how we created inputs on the global file? Like down here, they have something like that, this layout, hidden true, date, all this kind of stuff. Well, you can also kind of scope them even tighter to say, hey, just for this one collection of posts, here are the inputs I'm going to need. A title, an image alt, an author, tags, and then it gives you a multi-select and points you to the exact data that you need. All right, so all of this is being scoped to this post itself. Now, the schemas is another way of telling it, hey, how should you default when you create a new post? On ours, on the very first section of this, when we created a new post, it kind of just filled it with some of the stuff from earlier. If I come in here, though, and I hit click and I choose add new post, that was that title we saw just a moment ago, it's going to go ahead and scaffold this out based on a schema that it's already developed. So I'll come over here under files, under schemas, we had that page, or I think it was post.md. Now this is all that schema right here. So give me an empty date, an empty title. Here's the tags I want you to have as options. Blog would be the only one. Here's the author you can use. Here's what I want you to default all these things to. So it's doing that based off that CloudCannon configuration file. Come back inside here, right in here. That's what this schema is pointing to, this schemas/post. So a lot of this looks familiar, but it's just more advanced than what we were doing. Now we also have pages as well. These are the home page, the about page, all that kind of stuff. This is what we just did, all this kind of stuff right here. It gives you a special icon if you want to use that. We also enabled this visual editor, so we did all of this, save the icon. Now you also have add options, which we did not give it. To tell it, hey, add a new page. Here's the schema I want you to use. What schema would that be? It's the page.md, which we haven't looked at. And it gives you a special icon that they say, hey, I want you to use this icon in the visual editor. Now, because there are paginated collections in here, you can see how there's actually a schema just for that as well. And then for the inputs, they just say, hey, I'm going to pass you a bunch of content blocks. Whatever I pass you, make sure you just use those as the inputs. Now for the default inputs, you can see here we've got layouts, and it's hiding this so that people can't see that input in the visual editor. We've got the date, and it's telling you by this instance value what it should start at. So start it with right now, which is a way of telling CloudCannon, give me the date in this field. Now the reason they've done these inputs right here is because these must be used all throughout the site depending on what you're using. So a bunch of different components might all use this, so they've just gone ahead and defined it all right here like we did with that SRC property in ours. So I won't go through every single one of these, but you can see how there's just a lot of those. And then finally, remember that CloudCannon and Bookshop will actually generate these structures for us. Well, you can give it more instruction, and you would do that under the underscore structures object right here. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, all of that. Now, if I come over here and let's look at one of these pages. Now, since we are working on an about page, let's go ahead and grab that. Now, you'll notice I've got access to a bunch of editors here, the source editor and the visual editor, but nothing else. And that's because they've preferred only the visual editor like we did. So if I come in here, I can select any of these things, like this is SEO for the page, or these are different content blocks that are here. Part is about hero, this counter. So maybe let's just stick with this about hero for now. So I can come in here just like before and edit it in the sidebar, but the whole power of this visual editor is I can come right over here and just change it here. So I can say like not on a mission or whatever it happens to be, and it will update for us automatically. Now let's close this down. And if I scroll down, there'll be other sections like right here. This would be this counter right here. So I can click in here and click edit. I've got a title, I've got a suffix, I've got description, I've got different styles, and then I've got this array of different numbers that I can just change each of these. Each of these inside here are these objects inside this array. Tell me what the prefix should be, what the number should be, if they should have a suffix, what kind of text they should have. So all this is something you can edit visually. So all these sections, you can see how they just correspond to the different options. Now, one more thing just to kind of show you what this would look like in practice. If I come over here to my SRC and I come inside my content, and I come inside my pages, I'm going to look inside this about one right here. And you can see how it's saying it's been edited. That's because I changed it on the front end. Now, right over here, you can see I've got a schema, and I'm just pointing it to my default schema, which would be, in this case, my schemas/page.md. Here are all the things we could have changed. The title, the SEO, which we didn't really look at, and then all these content blocks. Now, once you have multiple content blocks, Bookshop will provide a name for them, and they correspond to where they're found inside of the components directory. In this case, the about/hero, that's where this one's found, so that's what it's called. Then you've got all the different things you could pass it, like a title, a description, hero images, a button, and then you got the next Bookshop element. This would be global counter. That's what we looked at just a second ago, built for your business. And then here are all the numbers with their prefixes and all that kind of stuff. So all the data is in this file because remember, we are extracting the data out. Now, each of these, once again, correspond to a component in our components directory. So this would be in the about/hero, this would be in the global/counter, this would be in the about/video, and in the about/team. So let's go look at those real quickly. I'll come over here to my files, and I'm going to come back in my SRC, and I want to look inside my components. Now, many of these are under the about, like the about hero, and remember, here's the one we're using right here. Now, this happens to be React. We wrote all of ours in Astro. Well, the one we wrote in Astro, but again, you can do it also in JavaScript if you prefer. And it's just a normal JavaScript component. If I come back over here though, let's come back here to SRC, components, about, and hero. You'll notice that there's another file here, and that's what I mentioned earlier, that you can actually give it more configuration directly inside here, which is why we nest them inside of folders like this. So you're going to do a couple things. Number one, you're going to tell it where it can be rendered. This is inside any section of content blocks. The label it should be given if you're choosing between components. A description, you can give it an icon. You can also give it some tags if you want to. Now this blueprint actually tells it what are the default items you should fill this with. And so this is the default. If you just add this section anywhere on your page, it will add it like this. And just like you can define inputs globally or per content selection, you can also do it per component in this bookshop.yml file, which tells it even more specifically exactly what you need in here. Now, remember, I mentioned earlier that you might have a select field where you say, hey, I only want a couple options to be available, like front bottom or back top right or back top left. Well, you're giving it these three, and this will show up as a drop down, just like if you had different authors, you could just drop down between them if you'd like to as well. So let's actually see this in practice. So this hero bookshop, that's what we're looking at. If I come in here to the pages, let's say we want to add another one over here since we're already editing this page. Well, I can just click add another content block and all these names show up. Up top here, you can see about hero because that's what we said we were going to label it. And I'll drop this in here and it should allow it to add it, let's see, somewhere down here. All right. And this is the default blueprint, all the text we want it to have. So we could say like ending or whatever. Now we also have this description. We can add hero images. Here's the button as well. If I add this hero image, not only can I change this, so let's explore existing images and that'll work. Let's select that file. People working, that's fine. Here's that dropdown. Back top left, back top right, front bottom, and we can just select this wherever we want. Now I'll go ahead and click save just to let that kind of work on the background. This needs some kind of new name. So we could say, I don't know, like post whatever. All right, and we'll save all. Now, while it works on that, let me come back out this way and mention something we didn't do a whole lot with, and that is these data files. Now, these data files can be just pure data. So if I come in here to this footer here, you can see we've got just basic footer data that as we change this, it would update throughout the site. However, you can do other things. Like for instance, we've got this theme right here. This is just giving me different colors to choose from. If I come over here to the source editor, you can see that it's literally just an object of colors. Well, what exactly is going on here? What I'm going to do is allow them to select different things, and I'm actually giving them a color selector just by naming it color. CloudCannon figures this out. So let's pick some different colors here. Maybe, I don't know, something like this. This will probably look really bad, but who knows? We're going to see. All right, so what I'm going to do is save this, and I'll go ahead and save this. And what it's doing is it's running a pre-build to actually inject that color throughout the site. Now, how would it be doing that? Well, if I come back into files and I come into this .CloudCannon, we're going to see a couple things. This post build is the same file that we created, right? So here they've added a couple extra things, but basically this is what we added, even though they have other things here as well. However, for this pre-build section, you'll notice what they're going to do is say, hey, go ahead and run this npm command. This says to run a file called fetch theme color. All right, that's part of the pre-build process. Well, where's that file? Well, let's jump back out this way. Fetch theme color right here. So it's a common JavaScript file. And all they're doing is using Node to actually fetch and read this file right here, that theme.json in our data file, using whatever has been passed in there and passing it along to our variables, which they're using Sass here. But you can see that then they're using that to then update all of these things inside of that Sass file, which means the entire site will then take on that new color scheme. Now I've yet to know what this is going to look like. So let's come over here and refresh. And there we go. Now it's all this kind of blue color, and all of this is happening in a pre-built script. So you can see they've really gone all out in this template. It's beautiful, and it also gives you kind of a bunch of really cool ideas of what you can do with CloudCannon and Bookshop in particular. Now, obviously, single thing on the entire site is not like able to be changed. They've limited it to exactly what they want. Like I mentioned earlier, you cannot add any new data files. You can, however, add new posts. You can also add new pages as well and kind of choose those pre-built components to build stuff out with. So this is a great example if you want to really dive into all the power available in CloudCannon, especially when it comes to Bookshop. Now, I promised one other thing, and that is to show you how you can dynamically render components depending on what somebody passes in to a page. So let's come over here to the files and see what they're doing when it comes to the pages directory. Now, like I mentioned earlier, most of the time, the way you work with CloudCannon and Bookshop in particular is you basically separate out the data from the routing, from all the rendering. So in this case, what they've done is just every single page gets passed here to this slug, unless it happens to be part of tags or blog, or it's this markdown file that doesn't have anything that changes. So this slug right here, you're going to notice a couple things they do. Let me zoom in just a touch. They're getting their static paths, and they're saying as long as the data is not hidden. All right, so in other words, as long as this page should be viewable, then what they're going to do is return the slug and the page. Now they do a little check here, but basically after that, they're doing exactly what we did. Now what they're going to do is on the actual page, they're going to extract the page props. That's what we did as well. And then they're going to check inside the data, which is the front matter, and they're going to say, is there anything called content blocks? If there's not, then basically throw an error. Otherwise, you're going to pass all this to not an about layout, but a page layout. So what's this page layout all about? If I come back out to the SRC and we come into layouts, we can look at our page layout. Now this layout takes in all those props and it passes it to another component called page. That page is going to look for something called content blocks. You can see it up here as well. And this is an array of items. These are the items that you might want as part of the page. So they're actually wrapping a page component in a layout component, and that's what's being used to render each page. So finally, let's look at this page component. I can see right here that it's from shared page. So if I come back over here inside the SRC, we're going to look at shared, and it's just this Astro page.jsx. And this could also be an Astro file just the same, and it would work the same kind of way, except this would be in the front matter. Because Astro uses Vite, we have access to this meta glob, which I think Astro wraps as like astro.glob. But either way, what I'm doing is saying, hey, give me every single thing that's in what directory? The components directory. Then all I'm going to do is loop through those objects. And for each of them, I want to strip out everything that's not the file name itself. So in the end, I want the file name. Once I have the file name, that's right here, then all I want to do is look inside all of my globbed components and say, hey, which one of them have this Bookshop name? So this gives me an object with all those. Now it's just simply saying which one is like the hero component. In that case, give me the stuff I need to render it, which is this object.default. That's what Vite is going to give you back. That's kind of the rendering engine for the object. Now, remember, I'm getting these content blocks from the actual page wrapper. Then we're just going to loop through every single content block I may have passed in. For each block, I'm going to basically pick it off this component's object. Then I'll render it out right here and just pass along all the different properties that I need to render that component. And because I'm using React or JSX here, you can see here that now I need to pass it a key as well, which you don't have to do with Astro, but even so, that's all they're doing. So let's look at a page just to see how this works, and then I'll let you play around with this a little bit more yourself. So if I come in here to one of these pages, let's pick the About page since we were already working with that. And in this case, I actually do want to come to the source editor just so I can kind of see what's happening. So the title, the SEO, all this stuff we've already talked about. This is the content blocks that we're then globbing and saying, hey, for every single item in here, I'm going to loop through on the page as it gets passed to that page wrapper. And for each one of them, I want to pass it all these items right here and make sure that it can be rendered. Now this Bookshop name, the reason they've titled it this way once again, is because that's what that Bookshop directive will do. It will kind of connect all the schemas that are needed, the structures that are needed behind the scenes, and then CloudCannon and Bookshop can render this right here. So this About Hero, this global counter, this about video, all of this is being passed to this right here. And for each of these, it's saying, hey, I found a Bookshop name called About Hero. It says, perfect, render it right here. It loops next and says, hey, here's another one. This is called global counter. Perfect, render it right below. So it's just rendering all these in a row as you loop through this. Again, we've separated out the data from the rendering. And now here's the benefit, is we can just put all the data in the front matter and then render it out below. So if you're used to writing your Astro sites in a certain way, to kind of go all in with Bookshop will take kind of restructuring how you think, but you can see the huge, huge benefit to a client. You can write in Astro, they can do all this. And well, I hope this was a huge help in getting started with kind of the benefits of CloudCannon. Now, I wish this could have been a full walkthrough of how to create a site from scratch using CloudCannon and Bookshop, but I hope it's given you enough here and pointed you in the right direction in the form of this template that you can kind of figure out some of the nuances for your particular use case. If you want to try out CloudCannon yourself, click on the link in the description to get started with a free trial. I want to say a huge thanks again to CloudCannon for sponsoring this video, and I hope that this will be a huge help, especially to agencies and devs who love Astro and yet want to be able to pass off something to their client or in-house editor that they can actually use and edit. All right, I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Happy coding.